Hello, I'm Lauren Green for FoxNews.com. More than 30,000 Americans are living with Huntington's disease, a brain disorder that causes progressive loss of both mental facilities and physical control. There is no cure, but advocates like my guest, MaryAnn Emerick, are working to change that. So welcome, MaryAnn.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I've just said what Huntington's disease is, but can you explain a little bit more what the signs of Huntington's disease is?
Sure. So it's an emotional, cognitive, psychiatric, and also physical disorder. It basically deteriorates your body and your mind slowly, and it usually hits in your mid-30s. My mother actually passed away a few years ago from the disease. You have a 50-50 chance of getting it. So every child, so myself, I have a 50-50 chance of getting it. My sister has a 50-50 chance of getting it. There's no cure and there's no effective treatment. And if you do have the gene, you will develop it at some point in your life.
Now, as I understand it, everyone has the gene for it, right?
Yes.
But if all of us have it, why do some people actually have it manifested?
Well, the gene itself, it depends on how many repeats you have. And for someone that does not have Huntington's disease in their family, they have a repeat of, let's say, 20 repeats of this CAG repeat. Someone that develops Huntington's disease has 40 plus.
I see. And you have gotten involved in advocacy for Huntington's disease. Why?
I became involved, well, like I said earlier, my mother had passed away from it, so it's in my family, so I'm at risk. And I had gone to the HDSA National Convention this year in Louisville, Kentucky, and I met a lot of people. And I met a lot of people that were my age, were older, were younger, and a lot of people with Huntington's disease. And they can't speak up for themselves anymore, and they can't stand up for what they need and deserve. And there was a lot of families there too that don't have the support that I was lucky enough to have, and also they're just tired of fighting. And so I felt like I needed to begin my journey and fight for them and for myself and for my family.
Now, have you been tested?
I'm actually in the process of getting tested, and the process is sort of like 4 stages, and you have to see genetic counselors and see a psychiatrist and see a neurologist in order for you to finally get the blood test. And
your sister, though, has decided not to get tested.
Yes, at the moment she's decided not to.
Why is that?
My whole life, personally, I was like, I'm against getting tested. If I have children, that's a different story when I get to that part of my life. But right now, I am at the point where I'm stopping my life because it's taking over my body. Every time I drop something, every time I can't complete a sentence, I'm like, it's starting, and I get very overwhelmed, and it's taking over my life.
And you mentioned some of the symptoms. I mean, they seem so innocuous. I mean, people drop things all the time. You know, as you get older, you sort of forget, and I forgot, what was I saying? I don't remember. What are some of the signs that you can actually say, okay, that could be Huntington's disease?
Well, within myself, like being in a depression, being misdiagnosed for being bipolar or being anxious, or like I said, depression again. Like for instance, my mother was misdiagnosed for post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar and suffering from depression. But meanwhile, it was just Huntington's disease in its early stages.
Wow. And how many people actually have this disease?
There's about 25 to 30,000 Americans that suffer, that are symptomatic at the moment. But there's over 250,000 people that are at risk.
And it could come on at any time.
Yeah, well, it usually hits in your mid to late 30s. For my mother, it probably started in her late 20s to early 30s. Her and my father had divorced when I was about 2.5, and that could have been part of the reason, but that's when she started becoming symptomatic. So, and other people, her father and her sister also passed away from the disease, and her sister had juvenile and passed away at 19. So it really runs in the family.
Yeah. It's very similar to ALS, is it not?
It's sort of like a mixture of ALS, MS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's all wrapped up into one crazy disease.
And you're doing some advocacy work down in Washington, D.C. as well.
Yes.
What's going on there?
I was down in D.C. last week. We're trying to get this bill passed. It's the HD Parity Act. It's a very bipartisan bill. The first part of it is trying to redefine what Huntington's disease is for Social Security. Because Social Security at the moment just states that it's a physical disease, that there's no psychiatric or emotional part of it. And like I stated earlier, for my mother, the emotional part took over her. And
yeah. There may be a lot of people who are trying to define or trying to figure out what's wrong with them or with a loved one. They can't figure it out. The doctors can't figure it out. And so maybe this is something they should be tested for. Would you recommend that?
If I would go into more family history and see how others, their ancestors, their parents or grandparents had passed, because it could. My grandfather, technically, he died very early because he had lung cancer also, but he also was gene positive.
I see. All right. But if you want to find out more about Huntington's disease, you want to go to hdsa.org and to find out more, and you get more information about it and if you should be tested or not.
Yes.
MaryAnn Emerick, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for watching. I'm Lauren Green.